Morning, everyone. I hope you've been having a great day so far. I've really enjoyed probably Jack and Izzy on stage, been the highlight of the morning. I know that they were practicing really, really hard yesterday and up on stage, and they're buzzing with excitement. So hopefully I can do half as good a job as they have done, but no promises at all. So talking today about shaping tomorrow and what our vision is and where we think technology is going. But I want to look back. So there's a famous quote from a philosopher, George Santayana: "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And I don't like making mistakes over and over again. I like some of the good things, but we still need to look back and see what we can learn from what's been happening in the past. So there's been a lot about funding, and Silicon Valley Bank was the second largest bank failure in US history. And that had a massive impact on everything that we've been doing. It was started by a traditional bank run. News came out, potentially things were going wrong, and it ran, and it ran, and it ran, and it led to a collapse. Not something we really could foresee. Then rising interest rates, we've been hearing about that in the news, but it's having a real impact on how we're raising money and funding new ventures. So it's just more and more expensive. Investors are getting more and more cautious in their investments. And Weaveworks was running for a good number of years, managed to raise 56 million in 3 rounds of funding. And yet earlier this year, collapsed. They were going through another round, again, trying to find more money to keep the business running. And almost overnight, their investors pulled out and they had to shut up shop. So really, you need to be looking at focusing on cash flow, sustainable growth, and really looking at profitability much earlier in your stage of growth at the moment. VMware, we heard about it in the last talk, and I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds at the moment. But this was a $69 billion acquisition that completed last year. And Broadcom have been really open about what they intend to do with the VMware business. And that is to double revenue from 4.7 billion to 8.5 billion in the next 3 years. However, they're going to be doing that from about 600 to 6,000 accounts. They've got an extra 100,000 accounts at the moment that, in their words, they are looking to trail off. Trail off to me means disappearing. So how do you double revenue and lose over 100,000 customers? Only way is to put prices up. And we're now seeing how they're doing that. Just one of the examples is that there was a minimum licensing core count. So if you had a socket machine, you now have to do a minimum license of 16 of those. So a very easy way for your prices to double overnight. And they're looking at 8 to 10 times increases of prices. There is latest news. There was an announcement from Hock Tan only on Monday about rolling back some of these changes. They've reintroduced perpetual licenses for a short amount of time and introducing security patches back into VMware for zero-day vulnerabilities. But is it too little, too late? I don't know. If you're running a VMware stack at the moment, do you trust this isn't just buying time for you to forget about it before coming back? Another thing we've seen over the last year are changes to licenses. So open source is what we all know and love, but there's this trend going to now source available licenses. HashiCorp moving over to BSL v1 and Redis going to SSPL. So these are licenses that now no longer are you able to take the code, modify it, use it, distribute these projects freely. You now have to start paying companies like HashiCorp and Redis in certain use cases. And with the HashiCorp license with BSL, they have the right to change that on a whim. So what you're doing today with Terraform or Vault could change tomorrow when HashiCorp decide that you are now a bigger threat to them, and they change their license and you have to change your entire business practice. This is not what the internet was built on. It was built on being able to openly share, contribute code, contribute ideas. And I really feel that HashiCorp and Redis have benefited massively from this. They've had a great community, a lot of us here, using these products, finding issues with scale, and then contributing fixes back, reporting bugs, updating documentation, writing providers. And they're throwing all of that away because they think they're seeing a bigger dollar sign and able to change this. One of the other dangers of this is that there are projects like OpenTofu, OpenBow, Valkey, that are forks of these projects as they were before they were changed licenses. However, we're now seeing HashiCorp, and I think for the first time, start to legally threaten these forks. There was an article 2 weeks ago from OpenTofu about source code that they are accused of stealing and putting into their open source project, and yet they've pushed back and saying that actually it was from when the project was MPL. So it's not even like HashiCorp really feel like they know what they're doing when they're challenging licensing changes for code. Supply chain attacks. I love this XKCD comic. It's saying that you've got all of your great applications, and yet one guy living in Nebraska is looking after this really critical piece of infrastructure. And I think we've had some really interesting 2 of these examples out here. If you do want to dig into the details, go onto these links and have a look. But there's a Linux GZ vulnerability. Just hands up, has anyone heard about this one? It was pretty big news. But this was a social engineering, probably a nation-state funded attack of getting something into this library. Linux GZ was maintained by a single maintainer who was accused of not updating things frequently enough, and a huge amount of pressure went on them to add a new maintainer to Linux GZ. And the first thing that was contributed back was some obfuscated code that allowed for remote execution in GZ. That then gets distributed, and we are all now running this. If it wasn't for open source and the ability for us to see this, we wouldn't have found that, and it would still be running today and causing trouble. Okta, I'll touch on briefly, was an attack via their customer support system that impacted 134 customers who had data stolen out, including session tokens, which meant that 5 customers were subject to a session hijacking attack and had application logins, not to Okta, but the applications you were developing and securing via Okta. So, it's not even that it's just supply chain of open source applications, but supply security in general is also under attack at the moment. PyTorch I wanted to put up. This didn't make it into production, luckily. It was caught. But there was, again, a sub-package, sub-dependency of PyTorch that was updated and proposed to go into PyTorch General that did things like read out your etc hosts file, etc password, your git config, your entire SSH config, including private keys, and then send them to this domain h4ck.cfd. Don't go and look at it, but I don't think they're up to anything useful. And I think can't look back with last year without looking at ChatGPT and mentioning them. So I think my first WoW experience with ChatGPT had nothing to do with tech. I'm a big sci-fi fan, absolutely loved Firefly, and I found a prompt that you could give to it to get a choose-your-own-adventure game in the Firefly universe. And it had character tracking throughout the entire story. It knew about the verse and all of the history and the lore within it. And I thought it was incredible. I then started doing boring things like working with it, but I still remember that choose your own adventure and taking me back to my childhood. We then had ChatGPT 4 come out, multimodal models, also behind a paywall, that increasing revenue for ChatGPT. And then we've had a huge number of other modules launch. Gemini from Google, ErnieBot from Baidu, Llama from Meta, Claude via Anthropic, funded by AWS, and Grok by X. I think this is just the start. I think we'll all agree AI and ML is a huge part of what is coming in the future. There is a hidden story, though, about ChatGPT that I think gets missed. This is a graph of users and user growth. And ChatGPT scaled up faster than anything else we've seen. I think at peak I saw it was onboarding 1 million users a minute. It took them 2 months, from December to January, to get to 100 million active users. As a comparison, TikTok took 9 months. Instagram, 2.5 years. So just think of those engineers in the background at OpenAI that were facing these scaling problems. And it's interesting to know that it was all powered by Kubernetes. Again, another open source project that's there for everyone to use. So I guess that's enough of looking backwards. What's coming up next? I think LLMs are going to be a huge part of what we're looking for in the future. And we're seeing now a trend towards smaller models that are being fine-tuned for specific use cases. So by this, rather than a general chat model that can answer everything, we're looking at support bots that will answer questions in your particular industry. And they're performing much better because they're tuned, they're pushed towards giving the right answers for your environment. We're also looking at getting these models running on your devices. Mobile phones, I know the Apple devices all have the neural engines, and we're starting to get models running on that. Projects like Olama are allowing you to run these chat models onto your laptops. And again, it's about getting that efficiency there. The other thing that's really, really interesting is bringing these models to your data rather than taking your data to these models. So let's not start sending loads and loads of data over to ChatGPT, paying probably somewhere for egress fees. Why not bring these models into the data center, very close to your data, and then you can start getting better results from that, faster results, and ensuring some better data security. MLOps is a new thing that we're going to be facing. Just looking through jobs descriptions that were very new over the past year, and I think we'll see more of, but prompt engineers, language model trainers, chief AI officers are now being added to boards. I don't think if I was standing here this time last year, I would even thought of that we need a chief AI officer, but now I think everyone is considering it. But there's a huge opportunity for your existing skills to be reused and reapplied into this modern world of ML and ML ops. I think we've been very privileged in a DevOps environment of having a huge wealth of tools and development over the past 5 years to make our lives easier. It hasn't really happened into the world of ML and training. So you can transfer these skills over. You're going to have to do some learning, but it is possible to move them over and start contributing back into these pipelines and training models and deployment architectures. But it is also be very wary of things that promise too much and seem too good to be true. So Devin was the first AI software engineer that released a very compelling video about doing code contributions back to projects, completing merge requests, doing merge reviews as well, and commenting on code. Turns out that rather than the 2 minutes it promised, it was taking 6 hours to turn around an MR review. So that was found on the video. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. One other interesting thing that's coming up is regulation around these AI models. So the EU have just put legislation in place, and they've categorized 5 areas. So there's unacceptable risk, and these apps are banned entirely. These are applications that manipulate human behavior, do things like real-time biometric identification, facial recognition in public, and those used for social scoring. So if you remember I can't remember the program, but when you get little points and you get ratings like your Uber driver, but then you're stopped entering shops because your rating gets too low. Those are completely banned at the moment in the EU. Next layer is high risk, and these pose significant threats to health, safety, or the fundamental rights of persons, especially when used in scenarios of health, education, recruitment, law enforcement, or justice. And rather than being outright banned, there is a set of controls around these models and deployments to ensure quality, transparency, human oversight, and safety. The next level down is on general purpose AI, which was actually only added last year after the rise of ChatGPT. And it applies particularly to these foundational models like ChatGPT and Llama about how they are transparent when they're giving these models out to the rest of us to start fine-tuning and building upon. And then the last two, limited risk, is about telling someone that they are interacting with AI-generated content, and things like deepfakes come under this level of you have to say it is a deepfake and then give the users the opportunity to step away from interacting with that application. And then there's the minimal risk, which is things we've been doing for a long time, like spam filtering, that the EU is saying, carry on doing what you're doing and don't really worry about it. I get the feeling that the US has been waiting for something like this and that there has been legislation that has been put on hold, but I would think over the next few years that is going to get picked up, and I wouldn't be surprised if it follows a similar model to what the EU have been doing. And we're all running into these AI generation and deploying applications like this, but unfortunately you do have to be slightly boring and think about the legal slides of doing all of this business. And then there's next gen AI. I don't know if anyone saw the Will Smith eating pasta video, which was released, I think it was when ChatGPT 4 was released. Don't watch it, or watch it with a shot glass and have some drinks as you do it. It's pretty bad. But actually Sora has massively moved on the video generation in only 12 months. And I can't stand here and predict what the next models are, because I wouldn't have said we'd get this much improvement in 12 months. It's absolutely mad. But I do want to warn that what we have today is a very, very good autocomplete, even when it comes to video generation. It's not general intelligence yet. One of the examples is that these models can pass the bar exam, do incredibly well, yet you could probably teach Izzy 20 hours to drive a car. You're not getting, well, maybe Tesla is next year going to be launching that self-driving car, but maybe not. Another thing is that there is a layer on top of language about intelligence. So cats and dogs, last I checked, they bark, but they don't really talk to us, right? But they still have intelligence. They still know how to train you to make sure that at breakfast time, you're awake and that there is food in their bowl, especially my cats. They've got some, like, bat you in the face, make sure that you're awake. But this is something that isn't represented in large language models today. And then we've got power concerns. We've had a lot of conversations about that this morning, but GPUs at the moment can take 10 times more than traditional racks in the data center. And that's just for the GPUs themselves, let alone all of the cooling and the additional losses that need to go in to get these models out there. So GPU racks, they can take between 50 and 100 kilowatts per rack. A traditional compute rack that we've been deploying, between 10 and 17. So a massive increase in power consumption. And we're moving towards green energy as well. There was a great talk 2 talks ago about that map of Texas and when we're able to get free energy coming in. It's really, really interesting to see that as a community, we are moving to care about these things. The last thing as well is about getting developers to care about green. And we've heard about shift left for a lot of things, security, but green is going to probably be the next thing that gets started shifting left. And there was a coding language power consumption league table that came out a few years ago. C, C++, Rust at the top, these compiled languages. Java did very, very well there. It's had a lot of optimizations over a long time. But then Ruby, and then most importantly Python, came as one of the least energy efficient languages. And a lot of what we're doing today with AI is very much Python based. So not only have we got very energy hungry GPUs, we've potentially got energy inefficient languages that we're using. I think we'll see a move towards hybrid and multi-cloud. It's been a topic of conversation quite a bit this morning as well. Deloitte said 85% of companies use 2 or more clouds at the moment. I'm not entirely sure how much I believe that's on an application side, or that they've got email from one vendor and hosting with another vendor. Is that truly multi-cloud? I think we'd all understand it as being able to have applications that are hosted in multiple clouds. And that means that we're also wanting to host these on clouds that we have in our own data centers. And repatriation is going to be on the rise as we're moving data out of our control, out of like AWS or something, even Civo, and putting it somewhere where you can touch and feel the flashing lights. I know it's very important. And I think that's where the rise of IDPs have been coming. At KubeCon, it was a huge part of the conversations was about IDPs, internal developer platforms. And I think talking to young people today, slightly older than Jack and Izzy, that they don't understand a world of consuming hardware and being limited by, you've got a rack of equipment and there are CPU and RAM limitations there. So IDPs are coming to try and give a public cloud experience at home. So a little bit about what Civo are doing to look at this. So we're trying to build an easy cloud with predictable pricing and super fast launch times. We've had a huge number of customers come on board over the past year. Particularly proud of Fermion and what they're doing and utilizing some of the GPUs that we have in deep green regions. We've really pushed forward with our AI and ML offerings. We've got H100s, A100s, L40Ss available now in 2 data centers. But I think we're also looking at these managed workflow engines like Kubeflow, because getting people up to speed with using raw GPUs is very time consuming. But being able to wrap it in this ML ops environment with workflow management really enables people to get faster and faster at deploying applications. And then we're also looking at the level above that with dedicated AI endpoints, where you can, just like ChatGPT, call a model and get an API response back. Edge regions is something that we're looking to do, really invest in at the moment. As I mentioned about VMware, we're seeing a lot of businesses move out of cloud, and also with AI moving data processing closer and closer to where customers and people are. So that public cloud experience with Kubernetes, compute, load balancers is what we offer. This is one of the pictures of one of the servers that we deploy. We will ship this out to a data center of your choice or a back office of your choice. We'll do all of the management, all of the installation of that, put all of the software on top of it, and then we're able to remotely manage it. If you want to hear more about it, I'll be at the booth this afternoon, so come by and have a chat. And then recently, really excited about this, we've just launched a VMware importer. So this is able to connect to your ESXi servers, query that, and then move VMs over into a Civo Stack region of your choice. And we're really seeing this as the ability to uplift customers that are in a traditional VMware environment, that 80% of people are just using compute and VMs, and start giving them access to containerization, function as a service, AI and ML, and really accelerating them into the next wave of computing. Related to that is sovereign clouds. And I think most people think of sovereign clouds as being mainly for government projects, but it's really not. It's really important for everyone here about being able to own the data locations and where your data is. And as I mentioned about bringing LLMs closer to your data, sovereign clouds is the way that we're doing that. Deep Green has been brought up quite a lot, but I thought I'd go into a little bit more about what they're doing. So they are looking at launching 2,000 sites over the UK and expanding from just heating swimming pools to giving back to community projects across the UK. There is a site with a housing project attached to that we have run out of power in the local distribution area to build houses. So what Deep Green are doing is using some of the capacity that they have to put a data center in the middle of a housing community and give away all of the free heat, all of the heat for that to the rest of that community. And that's going to be a 15 megawatt site that they're looking to build. This is what it looks like. Electricity coming in, heating up the oil, using the GPUs and compute there, then doing a round of heat exchange. We're not putting pool water into the GPUs. That would be a terrible idea. But this is what they're looking at doing in their deployment model. And this is what the prototype looks like actually in real life. The 4 gold bars that are standing up are GPUs. They're A100 GPUs. and then you've got a motherboard and CPU unit sitting on the side. And this actually, even though you can't tell, is sitting in oil at the moment. But just the way that the refractivity of that and photos work, it looks like it's sitting just above it. Interestingly, it's changing the way we're working with this equipment, because now when you have to do maintenance on this, you have to lift up not only the server, but all of the oil that is surrounded it as well. So it's, I think, 150 kilos, 200 and 300 pounds that you have to now be lifting out every time you need to do maintenance. Cables are also needing to be replaced more often because the mineral oil is stripping the coating off them. So there's a huge amount of innovation that they're doing to get this to be able to scale to the places where we need it to get. I wanted to finally finish on what Mark was touching on earlier about the cloud is broken and what we're doing. I really think that the cloud is a great place to be. I wouldn't be building one if I didn't believe that. But it has to be delivering on what was promised all that time ago, which is cheap, fast, easy access to compute that scales predictably as you want it, not when we as a cloud provider want it. It's a little bit of what we're doing there. I'll leave that up, but open the floor up for questions. Got one down here.
I'm right behind you.
Thank you so much. You just mentioned the sovereign cloud. First time I heard that expression. I'd worked for a defense contractor recently here in Clearwater, and it turns out that they have a lot of what they call ITAR data. ITAR is not probably familiar to a lot of the people unless they've been in that field. ITAR is, I think, international trafficking and arms regulations and so on. So all data has to be stored locally, right?
Yes.
Inside and cannot go across borders and so on. So how does your cloud help in that effort?
So it's the edge deployments and the private stacks that we would look to deploy there. So we have 2 regions at the moment in the US, one in New York, one in Phoenix, Arizona. But I think for that use case, it would be working with you to get a dedicated stack that we would put. With our VMware work as well, I've shown you a migration of virtual machines, but we also have a project that we're working on to migrate hypervisors from a VMware ESXi server over into a Civo hypervisor. So that would be the path that we'd go about with that opportunity to talk about reuse. But the really important thing that I would be keen is that government there, or even if it was a business, owns the hardware, owns the data center contracts, is in full control themselves of their data. And that's really, really important from a sovereign cloud deployment. All right. I'll be at the booth if there are any questions later that you think of. But thank you very much.